I hate when a movie's like so big to the point where you just can't escape it. Like, I love when movies do well and all, but every time I open any sort of social media, I just hear the Deadpool and Wolverine soundtrack. I'm honestly just glad I don't still work at my job at the movie theater. It was fun for the most part, but like, it was so hectic. I worked during Barbenheimer when Barbie and Oppenheimer released on the same day, and for weeks I was just getting slammed out there. I have a lot of crazy, funny stories from when I worked at the movie theater, but right now I'm gonna tell one of the craziest stories that ever happened when I was there. And it has nothing to do with a customer. It's actually about one of my coworkers and a manager. So I started working at the movie theater in the summer of 2022, and very quickly it became apparent that some of the managers had like these things about him. I had two normal managers, one who pretty much just hated his life when he was working, and the other who was kind of just a nerd. He's my guy though, shout out Michael. But it's the other two managers that I'm talking about. There's one manager who would make these like really risque jokes for a manager to make, and his situation in general was always confusing to me. I found out a little bit later after I started working there that manager, let's call him Alex, actually comes from like generational wealth, like old money. He did not need to be working in a movie theater with the rest of us, but he chose to. With his parents' money, he was like an aspiring filmmaker, but his parents practically live in a castle and he lives in a really big house himself. And I know that the managers there were making like a max of like $20 an hour, so there's no way otherwise he'd be able to afford that house. And like I said, he'd make these risque jokes, but he'd also do these really weird things with some of the younger girls. But there were these two instances that I was there for that were really weird. There's this girl who worked there who was like freshly 18, and he basically was asking her if she wanted a gift. And the gift that he was offering is one of his like $400-$500 wines that he has in his wine cellar. Here in the United States, it's actually illegal to supply alcohol to someone that's under the age of 21. And then there was another time where he was asking that same girl if she wanted to see a movie with him. He wanted to see a movie with her on our biggest screen, and he wanted to do it at like 2 in the morning, after everyone had left and after everything was closed down. So it would have been just her and him. She asked him if her sister could come, and he kind of was like, never mind. Very strange, but not the craziest thing that's happened at that job. So there's another manager that worked there, and he seemed kind of normal at first. He's like in his late 30s, very gray, and he seemed like he kind of never let go of his childhood, which, you know, I get to an extent. He's always talking about the original Ninja Turtles movie from like the late 80s or the early 90s or whatever. But the thing I started to notice is that he was like very much attached to the hip of this one girl. At my theater, the managers would clean the theaters with the ushers, and the ushers will clean like 3-4 movies in a row, and then they'll have like a 30-minute break, an hour break sometimes. So there's a lot of just walking around and seeing what's there to clean. And it seemed like every time this girl was walking around, that manager was right there with her. And at first I didn't think much of it, but as it went on and on, I just started to feel a little bit like uncomfortable for her. But I guess she always seemed like she wasn't in any distress or anything. This girl had been working there a lot longer than me. And when I started there, she was 17, about to turn 18, but she'd been working there for about 2.5 years, since she was 15 years old. Now, obviously I wasn't there when she started, but I heard through other people that she was always kind of close to him, even back then. And that's weird, you know, mid-30s and 15 years old, that's strange. But it had been this way for like 2.5 years, and I guess people were just kind of used to it. For the sake of making things easier, let's call this girl Ashley. And the manager, let's call him Mark. Me and Ashley never really talked like that. She was an usher and I was really in concessions and like the front of the building. But I started getting scheduled at the box office more, and the ushers need to go to the box office attendant basically just to see like how many people are in a certain movie. So we started talking more and more, and like just as we became work friends, she had told me that she's leaving. It was very sudden. It seemed kind of out of the blue, and she said she didn't mean to tell me. She blamed it on her Tourette's, which she actually did have. And I basically just pressed her like, wow, you're really leaving? And she said like, don't tell anyone, you're the first person that knows. And I said like, why am I the first person that knows? Because she was really close with this one girl, let's call her Sasha, but to be honest, her telling me was an accident in the first place. She ends up being like very cryptic about why she's leaving, and that just leads to more curiosity, because she says she like loves the job, but she has to leave. And I didn't know what that meant, but the first thing that my brain immediately went to is that like, oh my god, she's dating the manager and she has to leave, because maybe dating's like not allowed between managers and employees, which would make sense. So I'm the only person that knows that she's leaving this job, and it's about 2 weeks while this is all going on. And for this whole 2 weeks, I just keep asking her, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? And she's dropping these little sprinkles of hints everywhere. And she actually ended up telling me that on her last day, she would tell me why. Except on her last day, I was actually sick. And when I'm sick, it's bad. I couldn't have gone to work. I was probably posted in my room like SpongeBob when he had the suds. But since I missed this last day, I never learned why she was gonna leave. Until a week later, when Ashley's friend Sasha tells me the real reason. Apparently that manager that's always attached to the hip with her did have a little bit of a relationship with her, and a very inappropriate one at that. So this manager, Mark or whatever I said his name was actually guilty of the stuff that I suspected. But it actually gets worse than that. So Ashley's friend Sasha actually believes that Mark groomed Ashley from the time when she was 15 up until when she left at 18. But it gets worse than that. According to Ashley's friend Sasha, who I trust in this department because she was Ashley's closest friend and because she couldn't keep her mouth shut whenever I told her anything, she told me that 2.5 weeks after Ashley turned 18, she found out she was pregnant with Mark's child. And I don't know if you guys know anything about women, but that's just about the time frame that you need before you get a positive reading on a test. Maybe even a little bit before the mark. So whenever Mark and Ashley conceived this baby, could have actually been before she was 18. Sasha seemed pretty certain that it was before Ashley turned 18. But I was just taken aback. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So I learned that my manager Mark was a predator, is a predator, and I asked Sasha like, what's gonna be done about this? And she said nothing. She said there's no proof that any of this actually happened. But anyone that like really worked with them could tell that something was going on. But I tell her like, what do you mean there's no proof? There's proof like growing inside of Ashley. But apparently Ashley had actually had a miscarriage. So this whole thing is just a bunch of trauma and just bad stuff happening one after another. As far as like proving everything to be true, there actually was physical proof that all that stuff did happen, but Ashley didn't want to do anything in regards to getting Mark, the manager, in trouble. But dude, I saw one of those texts and it was just... ugh. So nothing really happens as a result of all this stuff, which is nuts. But about a month or two after Ashley had actually left, she came in to see a movie. And when she came in, everyone was sort of crowding around her like, hey, we missed you, blah, 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 this, that. And then after a couple minutes, the manager, Mark, comes to the huddle and tries to greet her, and she just leaves. So maybe like the time away from him was exactly what she needed to sort of take control of the situation and just sort of cut him off for good. So yeah, it's actually a good thing that she left that job. I started working there because I like movies and I wanted to see them for free. I was definitely not prepared for all that.